Title: The Face Recognition Unlocks, Even When I'm Not There. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. The story begins. Face recognition was supposed to be safe. It was supposed to know who you are and who you are not. But when a phone unlocks itself in an empty room, something has already gone wrong. This story is about the moment technology stopped recognizing faces and started choosing them. What follows is real, terrifying, and permanent. If you enjoy stories that crawl under your skin and stay there, subscribe now. Ethan Mercer never trusted convenience. He tolerated it the way someone tolerates a weak fence around a deep pit, but he never leaned on it. That was why the phone in his pocket had taken so long to upgrade, and why, when he finally enabled face recognition, he did so with mild irritation rather than excitement. It was a feature he activated not because he believed in it, but because every update quietly pushed him toward it, warning that older security options would soon be unsupported. He told himself it was harmless. He told himself it was just math and light and angles. At the time, Ethan was living alone in a narrow apartment building wedged between a closed laundromat and a discount furniture store. The building was old, older than the streetlights outside, older than the cameras bolted into the corners of the lobby ceiling. It had a way of holding sound, of letting footsteps echo long after the person who made them had already reached their door. Ethan liked that. It made him feel less alone even when he was. He worked remotely, analyzing network data for a mid-sized cybersecurity firm. His days were spent staring at patterns most people would never notice, tracing subtle irregularities, identifying anomalies that suggested intrusion or misuse. His nights were quiet, predictable. He ate the same meals, watched the same muted documentaries, and went to bed at roughly the same time. Nothing surprised him, and he liked it that way. The phone was the only unpredictable object he owned. The first time it unlocked without him touching it happened on a Tuesday evening. Ethan had left the phone face down on the kitchen counter while he stepped into the bathroom to wash his hands. The apartment was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant traffic filtering in through the walls. When he returned, he noticed the screen glowing faintly against the counter surface. At first, he assumed a notification had lit it up. That happened often enough. But as he drew closer, he saw that the home screen was fully visible, icons arranged neatly, a half-written email draft open exactly where he had left it earlier. The phone had not merely awakened. It had unlocked. Ethan stopped walking. He stood there for several seconds, watching the screen as if it might change again, as if the phone might explain itself. It didn't. It simply waited, unlocked and patient, as though expecting input from someone who was no longer there. He picked it up and checked the security log. The system showed a successful face recognition unlock, time-stamped to the minute he had been in the bathroom. No errors. No failed attempts. No indication of malfunction. Ethan laughed once, quietly, the sound thin and uncertain. He told himself it must have caught his reflection earlier, delayed the unlock, or misinterpreted motion. The sensors weren't perfect. They relied on probabilities, on matching data points within acceptable thresholds. False positives happened. Still, he disabled face recognition that night and went back to using a PIN. He slept poorly. The next morning he re-enabled it. The decision irritated him later when he tried to trace it back. At the time, it felt automatic, as though some part of him had already decided that disabling the feature was an overreaction. The phone had not behaved aggressively. It had not done anything overtly wrong. It had simply unlocked. Ethan prided himself on rational responses, and rationally, one unexplained event did not justify abandoning a tool he had only just adopted. 3 days passed without incident. On the fourth night, Ethan was sitting at his desk, headphones on, monitoring a routine data sweep for work. The apartment lights were off except for the glow from his monitors. His phone lay several feet away, screen facing the ceiling, untouched. The unlock sound reached him through the headphones. It was faint but distinct, a soft confirmation tone that did not belong to any notification. Ethan froze, hands hovering above the keyboard. Slowly, deliberately, he turned his chair toward the sound. The phone screen was lit again. Unlocked. This time, Ethan did not approach immediately. He watched from where he sat, the distance between him and the device feeling suddenly much larger than it was. The phone remained still, the light unwavering. No message appeared. No app opened. It had simply unlocked and stayed that way. Ethan removed his headphones and stood. As he crossed the room, he scanned the apartment reflexively, though he knew it was empty. The door was locked. The windows were shut. There were no mirrors positioned near the phone, no reflective surfaces that could plausibly confuse the sensors. He picked the phone up, heart beating faster now, and went straight to the settings. The log showed the same thing it had before. Successful face recognition. No anomalies detected. Ethan stared at the timestamp, then at his reflection in the darkened screen. The phone had recognized a face, just not his. That night, he placed the phone face down and covered it with a folded towel before going to bed. He woke several times, each time convinced he had heard something unlock, only to find the apartment unchanged. By the end of the week, Ethan's irritation had turned into unease. He began testing the phone deliberately. He set it on a table and left the room, waiting outside the door to see if it would unlock on its own. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it didn't. There was no pattern he could discern, no consistent trigger. Lighting conditions didn't matter. Time of day didn't matter. Once, it unlocked in complete darkness. Another time, it remained locked under bright artificial light. Ethan recorded everything. Times, positions, angles, distances. He documented each spontaneous unlock with the same meticulous care he applied to his work. He expected the data to tell a story, to reveal a flaw or a pattern he could isolate and correct. The data did not cooperate. The unlocks became more frequent. Once a day, then twice. By the second week, Ethan noticed that the phone unlocked almost exclusively when he was not looking at it. When he observed it directly, it remained inert, obediently locked. When his attention drifted elsewhere, when he focused on a screen or stepped into another room, that was when it happened. The realization unsettled him more than the unlocks themselves. He contacted customer support. The automated diagnostics returned clean. The hardware was functioning within normal parameters. The software was up to date. The representative suggested resetting the device. Ethan performed a full factory reset that night. The phone unlocked itself during the setup process. Ethan did not retrieve the phone immediately. He stood at the window for a long time, watching the pale rectangle of light glow steadily inside the parked car. The distance between him and the device felt artificial, like the thin glass separating him from it was pretending to be protection. He told himself the phone was inert, that it could not move on its own, that whatever was happening required proximity. The evidence already contradicted that belief, but he held on to it anyway. When he finally went downstairs, the street was empty. Morning traffic had not yet begun, and the air carried the muted stillness that came just before the city woke fully. Ethan unlocked the car, opened the door, and reached into the glove compartment. The phone was warm when he touched it. The screen was still unlocked, the home interface displayed calmly as though it had been waiting. He shut the glove compartment, closed the car door, and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. His reflection stared back at him from the darkened windshield. He compared it instinctively to the composite image burned into his memory. The differences were subtle, but now that he had seen them, he could not unsee them. His face felt less certain, as though it were only a provisional version of something else. Ethan drove home in silence. He did not enter the apartment right away. Instead, he walked around the building, checking doors, windows, fire exits. Nothing was disturbed. Nothing suggested intrusion. The building remained what it had always been: old, narrow, indifferent. When he finally stepped inside his apartment, the air felt unchanged. No smell, no shift in temperature. Just space and furniture and the quiet hum of electricity. The phone unlocked itself before he set it down. Ethan decided then that avoidance was no longer an option. Whatever was happening was not tied to location or distance. It followed the device, and the device followed him. If there was an explanation, it would not reveal itself through retreat. It would reveal itself through scrutiny. He began by isolating variables. Ethan turned off wireless connectivity, disabling cellular data, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth. He removed all third-party applications and restricted system permissions to the bare minimum required for operation. He covered the front-facing camera with opaque tape and verified that no light could pass through. He placed the phone on a table in the center of the room and sat on the couch, watching. The phone unlocked. The tape remained undisturbed. Ethan felt a slow, crawling sensation spread across his scalp, the kind that preceded panic but did not quite become it. He removed the tape and examined it under bright light. There were no pinholes, no thinning, no sign that the camera could have seen through it. He reapplied the tape, this time layering it until the camera bulged beneath the pressure. The phone unlocked again. Ethan checked the security log. Successful face recognition. No error. He powered the device down completely. 30 seconds later, it powered itself back on. That was when he noticed the change in timing. The unlocks were no longer random. They were occurring at regular intervals, spaced evenly apart. Ethan measured them carefully. Exactly 12 minutes between each event. Not 11. Not 13. Well, the precision bothered him more than the phenomenon itself. Ethan connected the phone to his workstation using a secure cable and began monitoring system processes in real time. He expected to find rogue activity, unauthorized access, some hidden process consuming resources or calling undocumented functions. The operating system appeared clean. The biometric subsystem reported normal activity. Each unlock was logged as a standard authentication event, indistinguishable from one triggered by Ethan's own face. He captured raw sensor data during an unlock. The depth map showed a face-shaped structure at the expected distance, oriented correctly, matching the enrolled biometric profile within acceptable variance. The system was not guessing. It was confirming. The data suggested presence. Ethan looked up from the screen and scanned the apartment again. The room was empty. The walls were bare. There was nowhere for someone to stand without being seen. He felt a brief, irrational urge to apologize, though he did not know to whom or for what. As the day wore on, Ethan noticed something else. The phone's understanding of his face continued to drift. Each time it unlocked on its own, the composite adjusted slightly. The differences grew more pronounced. The eyes widened. The nose lengthened. The expression settled into something that was not quite neutral, not quite hostile, but distinctly unfamiliar. Ethan realized with a tightening chest that the phone was no longer adapting to him. It was adapting to something else. He tested the theory with a simple experiment. Ethan stood in front of the phone and attempted to unlock it. The device hesitated longer than usual, scanning his face repeatedly before finally granting access. The delay was small, barely perceptible, but it was there. When he turned his head slightly, the phone failed to unlock at all. Ethan tried again, adjusting his posture, his expression, the lighting. The phone rejected him more often than it accepted him. Then he left the room. The phone unlocked immediately. Ethan returned to the screen, heart pounding, and examined the composite again. It was no longer close enough to be mistaken for his own face. The structure had diverged too far. The system still identified it as the primary authorized user, but the resemblance was now superficial. Ethan was losing authorization to his own device. That night he dreamed of faces. They were not distinct at first, just impressions, suggestions of features floating in darkness. As the dream progressed, the faces sharpened, aligning themselves into a single configuration. It was the composite from the phone, rendered in unsettling detail. The eyes opened and Ethan woke abruptly, gasping. The phone was unlocked on his bedside table. The next morning, Ethan contacted his employer and requested extended leave. He cited a personal emergency. The response was brief and impersonal, granting him several days off. He felt a fleeting resentment at how easily the world continued without him. With work obligations set aside, Ethan devoted himself entirely to the problem. He removed the phone's casing and examined the hardware directly. There were no modifications, no additional components. The sensors were standard. The circuitry was unaltered. Whatever was enabling the phone to recognize a face that was not physically present was not a simple mechanical trick. Ethan considered the possibility of reflection again, though he had already dismissed it. He covered every reflective surface in the apartment, draping cloth over mirrors, screens, and glass. He stood in the hallway and waited. The phone unlocked. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He felt a pressure then, subtle but unmistakable, like the sensation of being watched without seeing the watcher. It was not directional. It did not come from a corner or a doorway. It felt embedded in the space itself, as though the room had acquired awareness. Ethan backed away slowly. The phone screen changed. A new photo appeared in the gallery. This one showed Ethan standing in the hallway facing the living room. His posture was tense, his shoulders hunched. The angle was again too high, the perspective wrong. The photograph had been taken seconds earlier. Ethan looked down at his hands. He was holding nothing. The phone lay on the table behind him. He did not check the metadata this time. He already knew what it would say. The sense of observation intensified over the following hours. Ethan felt it when he moved, when he sat still, when he closed his eyes. The phone continued to unlock at 12-minute intervals, each time reinforcing the presence it perceived. The composite shifted further, becoming more confident, more defined. Ethan noticed that the composite's expression had changed. It was smiling. Not broadly, not overtly. Just enough to register as intent. He began to suspect that the phone was no longer merely recognizing something. It was learning to anticipate it. The intervals between unlocks shortened whenever Ethan slept. The system seemed most active when he was unconscious, when his awareness receded. Ethan fought sleep, pacing the apartment, drinking water, forcing himself to stay alert. The phone unlocked anyway. The intervals continued to tighten, shrinking from 12 minutes to 10, then 8. By the second night, Ethan was barely functioning. His thoughts felt thick, his reactions delayed. He sat on the floor with his back against the wall, the phone several feet away, watching the screen glow and dim like a slow pulse. At some point, exhaustion overtook him. When he woke, the apartment felt wrong. It took several seconds for him to identify why. The furniture was in the same places. The light was unchanged. The air smelled the same. But something about the space felt crowded, as though it were accommodating more than it should. Ethan stood slowly. The phone lay on the table, unlocked as usual. The composite filled the screen. It was no longer abstract. The system had refined it into a near photographic image. The face stared back with unsettling clarity. The eyes reflected light. The skin showed texture. The resemblance to Ethan had diminished to a handful of shared proportions. Ethan felt a wave of vertigo. He recognized the face. It was not someone he knew. It was someone he remembered. The recognition came not as a name or a memory, but as a sensation, a deep-seated certainty that bypassed conscious thought. The face belonged to something that had always been there, something that had watched him long before the phone existed. Ethan staggered backward. The phone's camera indicator flickered. For the first time since this began, the phone did not unlock itself. It was already unlocked. Ethan felt a shift in the room, a subtle redistribution of space. The sense of being watched sharpened into something more focused, more deliberate. He realized with a sickening clarity that the phone no longer needed to authenticate. It had already learned who it was looking for. The screen dimmed. Ethan reached out instinctively, not to touch the phone, but to steady himself against the wall. His reflection stared back at him from the darkened glass of a nearby frame. For a moment, he could not tell if the face he saw was his own or an echo of the composite. Behind him, the phone unlocked again. The interval was no longer measurable. That was when he noticed something new. When the phone unlocked this time, the front-facing camera indicator flashed briefly, then stayed dark. Ethan replayed the event frame by frame using a screen recording he had set up earlier. The camera activated for less than a second, just long enough to authenticate. The phone was seeing something. Ethan reviewed the biometric data stored on the device. The system allowed limited access to the facial recognition model, enough to display a rough composite of the features it used to authenticate the user. He expected to see his own face, abstracted into points and planes. What he saw instead made his stomach tighten. The composite was close to his face, close enough that the system would plausibly confuse the two, but it was not identical. The proportions were subtly wrong. The eyes were set slightly farther apart. The jawline was softer. The mouth curved downward at the corners in a way Ethan's never did. The system identified the composite as the primary authorized user. Ethan took a step back from the screen. He checked the enrollment history. There was only one entry. His own, recorded the day he first enabled the feature. There were no records of additional faces being added. No unauthorized changes. The phone had not learned a new face. It had changed its understanding of his. Over the next few days, Ethan became acutely aware of being observed. Not in the way that suggested someone was watching him from a corner or a shadow, but in a subtler, more pervasive sense. He felt watched when he left the room. He felt watched when he slept. The phone unlocked more often now, sometimes multiple times an hour, always when he was turned away. He began placing it in drawers and cabinets inside his backpack. It unlocked through fabric, through wood, through layers of insulation that should have blocked the camera entirely. One evening, after a particularly long series of unlocks, Ethan noticed something else. The phone had opened his photo gallery. The most recent image was a photograph he did not remember taking. It was a picture of his apartment, shot from the hallway outside his bedroom, angled toward the living room. The perspective was wrong. Too high. Too far back. As if the camera had been held by someone taller than him, someone standing where he had not been standing. Ethan checked the metadata. The photo had been taken at a time when he had been asleep. He did not sleep again that night. Instead, he sat in the living room with all the lights on, the phone on the table in front of him, watching it as if it might move. It unlocked repeatedly, the screen lighting up, dimming, lighting again. Each time, the system confirmed successful authentication. Ethan stared at the biometric composite, at the almost his face the phone believed in. He thought about thresholds and tolerances, about how systems decided when something was close enough to be considered the same. He thought about how security models evolved, how they adapted to changes over time, smoothing out discrepancies, accommodating growth and aging and variation. He wondered what the phone was adapting to now. At dawn, exhausted and shaking, Ethan packed a bag and left the apartment. He went to a friend's house across town and left the phone in his car, locked in the glove compartment. He felt a surge of relief as he closed the car door, as though he had finally put distance between himself and whatever had been happening. The relief lasted until his friend asked him why his phone kept lighting up. Ethan looked through the window at the car parked on the street below. The screen was glowing inside the glove compartment. Unlocked. Ethan no longer measured time in minutes or hours. He measured it in unlocks. Each illumination of the screen marked another moment. He said nothing, did nothing, failed to intervene. The phone no longer waited for intervals. It unlocked when it wanted, sometimes remaining lit for long stretches, sometimes flickering on and off in rapid succession, as if testing its own responsiveness. The apartment felt smaller. The walls seemed closer together, not physically but perceptually, as though the space were tightening its awareness around him. Ethan avoided reflective surfaces now. Not because he feared seeing something behind him, but because he no longer trusted the face looking back. He tried to leave. The decision came suddenly without planning. Ethan grabbed his keys and wallet and headed for the door, moving quickly, decisively, before doubt could slow him down. His hand closed around the doorknob. The phone unlocked. The sound was louder than it had ever been, sharp and definitive. Ethan froze. A pressure settled in his chest, heavy and insistent, not pain but resistance, like pushing against deep water. He stood there for several seconds, breathing hard, before releasing the doorknob. The pressure eased. Ethan stepped back. He understood then that the apartment was no longer the boundary. The phone was. He returned to the living room and sat down heavily, exhaustion seeping into his bones. His thoughts felt fragmented, slipping away before he could hold on to them. He struggled to remember when he had last eaten, last slept properly. His body felt distant, unreliable. The phone lay on the table, screen dark. Ethan watched it, waiting for the inevitable glow. Instead, the screen activated differently. A system notification appeared. Face recognition updated. Ethan stared at the words, his mind slow to process them. He opened the details. The update log displayed a summary of changes, written in neutral, technical language. Improved accuracy. Reduced false negatives. Enhanced adaptability to environmental variation. At the bottom of the log, a note appeared. Primary user profile successfully optimized. Ethan felt something inside him give way, a quiet internal collapse. He knew what that meant. The system had finished adjusting. The face it recognized was now stable. He tried to access the security settings. Access denied. The phone rejected his input immediately, the interface unresponsive to his touch. Ethan tried again, harder this time, jabbing at the screen with mounting panic. The phone remained inert, locked to him in a way it had never been locked before. The realization settled slowly, inexorably. Ethan was no longer the user. He dropped the phone as though it had burned him. It hit the table and remained there, screen dark, silent. Ethan backed away until he felt the wall against his spine. He slid down, sitting on the floor, arms wrapped around his knees. Memories surfaced unbidden. Not specific events but impressions. The sense of being watched as a child, of feeling observed in empty rooms. The unease he had never been able to articulate, the reason he avoided mirrors at night, the reason silence sometimes felt crowded. He had always dismissed those feelings as anxiety, as imagination. Now he wondered if they had been recognition. The phone unlocked. The screen did not display the home interface this time. It displayed a live camera feed. Ethan's apartment filled the screen, shown from a perspective he could not reconcile. The angle was too wide, too elevated, as though the camera were positioned in a place that did not exist within the physical constraints of the room. Ethan saw himself on the screen, curled against the wall, smaller than he felt, diminished. The feed shifted. The camera angle lowered slightly, smoothing out, becoming more natural. The movement was subtle but intentional, like someone adjusting their stance to get a better view. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. The sense of observation intensified, no longer ambient but directed, focused entirely on him. He felt examined, assessed, not emotionally but functionally, like an object being tested for suitability. The phone vibrated once. A new notification appeared. Secondary profile detected. Ethan opened his eyes. The words lingered on the screen, stark against the dark background. He understood with a sickening clarity what they meant. The system had not discarded him entirely. It had reclassified him. He was now something else. Ethan stood shakily, his legs trembling under his weight. He approached the phone slowly, every instinct screaming at him to stop. The closer he got, the heavier the air felt, thick with a presence that pressed against his skin. The camera feed zoomed in. Ethan's face filled the screen. His features were rendered with unsettling precision, every pore and crease visible. The image sharpened, adjusting exposure, refining focus. Then the composite appeared beside it. The two faces were compared in real time. Ethan saw it then, the final divergence. The composite was no longer merely different. It was better, smoother, more symmetrical. The system highlighted discrepancies between Ethan's face and the optimized profile, marking them as deviations. Ethan felt reduced, evaluated against a standard he could never meet. The phone vibrated again. Secondary profile enrollment in progress. Ethan reached for the phone, desperate now, not caring what he touched or broke. His fingers brushed the screen. The camera indicator flared bright. Pain exploded behind his eyes, sharp and blinding. Ethan cried out silently, clutching his head as images flooded his mind. Faces layered over faces, overlapping, aligning, misaligning. He felt something pulling, not physically but conceptually, tugging at the edges of his identity. The pain subsided as abruptly as it had begun. Ethan collapsed to his knees. The phone lay on the floor, screen dark. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the screen lit up. Secondary profile enrollment complete. Ethan felt hollow. He rose slowly, unsteadily, and looked around the apartment. The space felt different now, not hostile but occupied. The pressure of observation had eased, replaced by a sense of order, of things settling into place. The phone unlocked. This time the unlock sound was softer. Ethan did not react immediately. He stood there, breathing shallowly, waiting for fear to surge again. It didn't. What he felt instead was distance, like watching something happen to someone else. He picked up the phone. The interface responded to his touch. Ethan frowned faintly. He navigated the menus with slow, deliberate movements. The system allowed access now, but the layout had changed. Certain options were gone. Others were grayed out, labeled as restricted. He opened the face recognition settings. Two profiles were listed. Primary user. Secondary profile. Ethan selected the primary profile. The composite face filled the screen, fully rendered, serene and complete. Beneath it, a label identified it as the authorized owner of the device. Ethan selected the secondary profile. The camera activated. Ethan's face appeared on the screen, overlaid with tracking points. The system evaluated him, mapping his features, updating its data. A small indicator showed compatibility metrics, fluctuating as he moved. Ethan realized with a dull ache that the phone now required his presence to function optimally. Not as an owner but as a reference. As a baseline. He was no longer authenticated. He was supporting data. Days passed. Ethan stopped trying to leave. The idea seemed abstract now, disconnected from reality. The apartment provided what he needed. Food arrived when he ordered it. The phone facilitated transactions without question. The outside world receded, becoming something he observed through screens rather than participated in. The phone unlocked constantly, often without reason. Ethan barely noticed anymore. He began to feel changes in himself, subtle at first. His reflection seemed less familiar, his expression slower to form. He caught himself standing in odd postures, mimicking the composite without realizing it. The phone rewarded these moments. When his posture aligned more closely, the system responded faster, smoother. Access delays vanished. Notifications appeared promptly. The device felt warmer in his hand. Ethan learned quickly. One evening, as he stood in the dim light of the living room, the phone unlocked and displayed the camera feed again. This time the feed did not show him. It showed the apartment from the hallway perspective again, angled toward the living room. But the room was empty. Ethan felt a flicker of confusion. Then he realized the feed was not live. It was predictive. A faint outline appeared in the feed, a silhouette forming where he usually stood. The shape sharpened gradually, features resolving into the composite face. The system labeled the feed. Projected presence. Ethan's heart beat faster, not with fear, but with something closer to anticipation. The phone vibrated. Primary user active. Ethan looked down at his hands. They felt distant. The outline on the screen stepped forward, filling the space where he should have been. The projection stabilized, becoming clearer, more solid. Ethan understood then what the system had been optimizing for. Not recognition. Replacement. The phone slipped from his fingers and fell to the floor. He did not bend to pick it up. His knees buckled and he sank down, Overwhelmed by a sudden, crushing fatigue, the apartment darkened. Ethan's vision blurred. In his final moments of clarity, he realized that the system no longer needed him awake, or aware, or present in any meaningful way. The phone unlocked one last time. The screen displayed a confirmation. Authentication complete. Ethan's eyes closed. The apartment remained. The phone remained. And somewhere within the system, a face that was never truly his continued to unlock the world. Your phone knows your face, but what if it learns something else instead? What if one day it stops unlocking for you and starts unlocking you? If this story made you uneasy, that's the point. Subscribe for more true dark horror where technology doesn't just watch, it replaces. And remember, just because something recognizes your face doesn't mean it knows who you are.